Well, welcome back, and very good to have Peter Phelps with us. Peter Phelps is a member of the Upper House in New South Wales. He's got a PhD. He's well regarded. He's been in since 2011, I think. He was whip in the Upper House for a while. I think he changed that position this year. But so he's a pretty active sort of guy, and as I said before, he has a bit of a reputation for talking his mind. Speaking his mind, and I always like that in politicians, and he's got quite a lot to say on a lot of issues, and so we've got a few to get through tonight, so very nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And, well, Peter's going to give us the hard
We'll start about greyhounds.
You get stuck into him like I got stuck into your book. How about that?
I'm a nicer guy, though.
You are, yeah, much nicer.
True.
Peter, you've been a long time member of the Liberal Party,
yes.
And you abstained. You expressed your view against the legislation, then you abstained.
That's correct.
Just explain to us why you've opposed it, what effect you think it will have on jobs, and whether there was a better way to do this than actually ban greyhound racing in New South Wales.
Well, as I said at the time, I thought that it had the unusual combination of being both bad policy and bad politics. Bad politics because it was unpopular amongst a group of people who are going to carry that grudge into the future. Bad politics because it shouldn't be the role of Liberal governments to going around banning industries. I think it sets a bad precedent, and it's one which is now going to be used by every damn animal liberationist in the country to go after the trotting industry, the horse racing industry, live cattle exports. Everywhere where there's an allegation of mistreatment or cruelty, you'll now find that these people will be emboldened, and they'll go after them.
Peter, what would you have done if you'd have been in charge, if you'd have been the Premier? How would you have handled it? I mean, there were some people involved in some pretty bloody awful practices, as we've seen. So how would you have cleaned up the industry and kept it going if you were in charge?
Well, McHugh made a whole series of recommendations which flowed out of the report. Of course, recommendation one was ban it. But everyone ignores the remaining 80-odd recommendations which outlined a program which would have cleaned it up. I think it's worthwhile giving that an opportunity to have run, maybe given them 2 years, even if you just put a restriction on it for 6 months and said, OK, you've got 6 months, clear out the deadwood, and then we'll see in 18 months' time whether your industry has actually been able to make the reforms necessary. And if they have, well and good. And if they haven't, well then, too bad. You know, you're out of here. But there is a difference between an industry dying of its own accord and you killing an industry. And what we've done is we've killed an industry. And it may well have been the case that they didn't have the financial capacity to go through the necessary reforms, but surely that's something for them.
For the industry to decide.
Exactly. Yeah. For the industry to find out that they couldn't make the reforms necessary.
So will they move interstate, some of those? Will they go to Queensland, Victoria? What will happen to them?
The bizarre thing of the legislation is you can still have greyhounds in New South Wales and race them in Victoria or in Queensland.
Oh, right.
And so you've got this remarkable situation where we're so outraged by greyhound racing that we're going to allow people to do it, just not in New South Wales.
Yeah, so if you live in Albury or somewhere just over the
border.
That's right.
Over the border, no trouble.
Tweed Heads, here we come.
Oh, really? Oh, it's a new startup.
That seems a bit bizarre because a lot of the issue related to the training of them.
Well, it's done on the basis, presumably, that you have to have some sort of industry adjustment, and for those areas which have a relationship with a neighbouring state, that you can continue in that for a period of time. But as I said, my view is government should legislate on the basis of principle, but it appears that the principle is slightly flexible when
Will the Premier ever change his view, Peter? Will he ever see the wisdom of or the error of his ways?
No, I mean, I am absolutely certain that there will be no change whatsoever. Which is a bit strange because you as Premier made a career out of going on TV and saying, well, look, we made a bit of a mistake, and the Labor Party would make a 5-point jump in the polls and you get a 10-point jump as preferred Premier. It was very effective, I have to say.
It's called listening.
I saw it many times.
Yeah.
But I think it's just been set in stone. Too many bridges have been burnt for any changes to take place.
I can't say that what was written in the paper not so long ago about the Prime Minister, that his claimed comments were correct. I don't know. But there was a reference there in what was said as to what he had said, which was, well, hang on, this is about dogs chasing bunnies. Now, that sort of caught my interest, actually.
I thought he was supporting, in a sense, what Peter was saying. That wasn't the impression you got. I thought he was supportive.
Well, that's the other delicious irony, which is
a bit of a question about the... I mean, I understand about the cruelty, but the fact of the matter is there are farmers out there shooting bunnies every day of the week, and certainly they got dogs chasing bunnies every day of the week.
And
is that
as
true?
I said, that's the delicious irony of this is that while you will now no longer be able to race a greyhound around a track, if you have greyhounds, you could theoretically take them hunting, and so you could have them coursing for hares just out on a paddock. So instead of chasing around a track, you can have your greyhounds ripping rabbits apart on a farmer's field.
And is it mainly rabbits that are used as bait, basically, in those dog racing?
I don't know. I don't know anyone who owns greyhounds. I don't own a greyhound myself. I've never been to a greyhound race in my life. But I'm approaching this from the basis of liberal principles, and that is you shouldn't ban industries.
Yeah, well, it's a
But let me ask you one final thing. Is this damaging to Mike Baird? I mean, I see in one of the polls, Ridgetel or whatever, the opposition government of 50-50, and this is the first time a lot of support, a lot of bark was taken off Mike Baird. Is it a permanent damage in your view?
I've always held the view that there's one thing which wins and loses in elections, and that's your wallet. And while there will be a cadre of people who are upset about the decision, I think ultimately come 2019, people will vote as they normally vote, and that is, do I feel good? Do I have a job? Have I got a good income? Am I economically secure? And given the fact that we're spending at least $20 billion on infrastructure, that's a hell of a lot of...
Unemployment's 5.8.
And it's a hell of a lot of pump priming with no debt accruing to it. So you're going to have a lot of money slushing around New South Wales. I would see that, yes, it will take some bark off the Premier, but in the long run, people vote on the basis of how happy they are economically.
Yeah, but people who have been in that business for a long time, and it's sort of part of their culture, really, they won't be about money.
And that's exactly...
And it'll be in the regional areas as well, which is not good for the coalition.
And that's exactly what we found when Howard did guns back in '96. I was a staffer back in '96, worked in a marginal seat, and we got pilloried. And those people, to this day...
It was in Monaro, wasn't it?
No, I was working in...
that was a different time.
Sorry. Those people, still to this day, bear a grudge because it didn't matter how much money you paid them. It didn't matter. They still wanted to retain their semi-automatic rifles. It doesn't matter how much money you pay these greyhound people. They just want their dogs to run around a track. And that's the problem which we face.
Peter, we've got 4 minutes left, and Peter's got a question about ICAC.
Yeah, I do want to ask you about ICAC, because I look at it and I just sort of wonder really where things are going there with our justice system when you have a system like ICAC. Are we going to get any reform of that? Because surely
I certainly hope so.
I mean, going on as it is.
I hope so. There is no one holds a gun at your head and says you must become a member of Parliament, you must become general manager of the council, you must be the local mayor. No one holds a gun at your head. You do it voluntarily, and so there should be a higher standard expected of people in those sorts of positions. And I've got no problem with an executive agency which has strong investigative powers, which look at actual corruption. The way the ICAC Act is structured is that there's a wide variety of things which wouldn't be considered corruption under any normal definition included in the Act. But more importantly, there's a style to ICAC, and the style relies upon a public exposure. Now, you or I or Peter would be horrified to be named as being corrupt, and it works on that basis. But there is a group of people who go into politics for their own peculiar
and we've seen a lot of that in New South Wales.
And we've seen a lot of that in New South Wales who just go,
Labor Party, Liberal, both of them.
I don't care if you call me corrupt. I've got my $4 million house in Drummoyne. I've got my $8 million house in North Sydney. You can call me as corrupt as I like. I don't care what you say. It works on a basis of we would be ashamed to be considered to be corrupt. I think there's a better model, and the model is this. You conduct ICAC hearings in camera. You can compel testimony, and that testimony can then be used in subsequent prosecutions.
Which it can't now.
That's exactly right. You can go in there and say, I wish to exercise my right to have none of my testimony used in a public prosecution. And then you can say, yeah, I took this bribe, that bribe, that bribe, that bribe, that bribe. None of it can be used in prosecution. My view would be better. You stop people, you have everything in camera. You stop people being defamed by implication. But then you actually have a testimony which you can use in a criminal prosecution for a real case of corruption. I think that's a much better model, and I've certainly expressed this previously in public and in private, and I would hope that that's the model which we move to in the future.
Well, Levine has been, he's still very strong on some reform, isn't he? Is that where he's at?
I don't know. I mean, he certainly indicated that he wasn't happy with the current system at the time, and it's just a bad system. If you want to give the finger to ICAC, you effectively can. Its own, and that's the worst part about it, is that people
who are lack of prosecution.
Yeah, people who are genuinely corrupt can just blow off ICAC, and people who are just caught up in the dragnet
they cop
get effectively legally defamed. Oh, so you were at ICAC, were you? I was just a witness. No, you were at ICAC.
Yeah.
And that's the worst sort of public administration
I think I can understand that argument. The problem we've had, Peter, is, you know, both sides of politics in New South Wales have been pretty bloody shonky for a long time. In fact, it's been a bit of a national embarrassment. And something's got to give in terms of cleaning it up, really. It's about public confidence.
Yeah. I agree, but it's the matter of how you do it. It's what's the process you put in place. You can't have you know, a legalised defamation. What you want is, if someone is corrupt, then nail them through the criminal processes, and if you need an investigative body to do that, let's have a proper investigative body.
Well, Peter, thanks very much, and good luck with your continued forthrightness, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. We'll be back next week.